Millions of square feet of glass and steel. Server farms quietly processing billions of transactions. Today, the physical footprint of Alibaba is massive, sterile, and largely invisible to the outside world. For years, this company occupied the center of the global stage, widely recognized as the Amazon of China. Yet today, it has effectively vanished from daily conversation. It is a deliberate, heavy quietness, a stark contrast to the era when its every move commanded the absolute center of the global financial spotlight. To find out where that monolithic silence came from, we have to rewind. Far away from these quiet corporate campuses, back to a time of loud, chaotic human energy. Because to understand why this titanic empire faded into the shadows, we first have to look at the deafening noise of its creation. The year is 1999. We are in Hangzhou, China, a sprawling city with deep cultural roots, over 6,000 miles away from the venture capital boom of Silicon Valley. There are no sleek office parks here, just a single, cramped apartment. The air is thick with dust, the floor is littered with empty instant noodle bowls, and the space is completely dominated by cheap folding desks. At the center of this room is Jack Ma. He isn't a seasoned software engineer or a tech prodigy with a Stanford degree. He makes his living as a humble English teacher. Around him are 18 friends and former students, working shoulder to shoulder. They are exhausted, running on almost no sleep. Yet the room is vibrating with an intense collective optimism. Their goal is massive. They want to take the thousands of isolated domestic factories operating across China and wire them directly to the rest of the world. They have almost no money and barely enough room to pull back a chair. This suffocating environment forces them to rely entirely on a shared, stubborn vision, which for a long time remains their only real asset. In the late 90s, the Chinese internet is still waking up. It is incredibly primitive, defined by dial-up tones, slow loading times, and a stark lack of domestic content. This creates a massive bottleneck. Millions of Chinese manufacturers are producing physical goods at scale, but they are entirely invisible. They have no websites, no email addresses, and no digital infrastructure to find international buyers. To fix this, Ma's team decides to build a B2B platform. B2B stands for business to business, meaning that instead of selling single items to individual consumers, they will create a digital space where companies can buy and sell goods with other companies in bulk. This visualization shows how that network formed. Isolated nodes, representing thousands of unconnected Chinese factories, suddenly routing through one central hub, Alibaba, and instantly expanding out to a global web of buyers. They rapidly become the first large-scale digital directory in the region. Instead of selling individual products, the team is constructing the digital infrastructure that will eventually carry the entirety of Chinese global export. But just as they start gaining real momentum, the global market fractures. This graph illustrates the year 2000 dot-com crash, a massive economic collapse where speculative technology investments plummeted and wiped out trillions of dollars in market value almost overnight. Inside the Hangzhou apartment, the panic is immediate. Foreign capital evaporates. The small cash reserves they use to keep their servers running are draining fast, bringing them within weeks of going completely dark. Then a lifeline arrives. The Japanese conglomerate SoftBank steps in, delivering a crucial multi-million-dollar cash injection right at the breaking point. This capital allowed Alibaba to maintain its operations through the worst of the volatility, outlasting competitors who were burning through their last reserves and dissolving in the crash. Imagine the apartment late at night. The team has fallen asleep at their desks from sheer exhaustion. Only one person is left awake, bathed in the blue glow of a CRT monitor, realizing they have actually weathered the storm. Surviving this fire allowed Alibaba to scale into a global empire, eventually processing more commerce than its American rivals combined. But that unprecedented accumulation of power would later collide with the state itself, a friction that ultimately forced the Titan into the deep, silent shadows where it sits today. 2003. The Chinese internet is waking up. Millions of people are logging on from crowded cafes, and Western tech giants want a piece of the action. eBay, the undisputed king of e-commerce at the time, has just marched into China, ready to lock down this massive new digital territory. For a local startup named Alibaba, this was an existential crisis. They were heavily outgunned. eBay had global infrastructure, immense name recognition, and deep pockets ready to spend whatever it took to crush local competition. Alibaba launched a counterstrike that looked like financial suicide. They released their own marketplace called Taobao and made it completely free for everyone to use. No listing fees, no transaction cuts. While eBay relied on a strict fee-based model that taxed every sale, Taobao removed the financial friction entirely. Buyers and sellers flocked to the platform that didn't charge a toll, rapidly starving the Western invader of the user base it needed to survive. By intentionally burning cash and sacrificing short-term revenue, Alibaba bled out a wealthy opponent. It was a ruthless defense strategy that forced eBay to retreat and secured Alibaba the domestic crown. But winning that turf war exposed a fatal flaw in the system. In the early days of the Chinese internet, there was a profound lack of consumer trust. The idea of sending money to an absolute stranger over the web was terrifying. Alibaba now had a platform overflowing with millions of users browsing free listings, but those numbers meant nothing if people were too afraid to actually pull the trigger and transfer their cash. Credit cards were rare, and digital consumer protection didn't exist. To the average citizen, buying a digital picture of a product and hoping the real thing showed up in the mail felt like stepping into a scam. Beating eBay was irrelevant if Alibaba couldn't solve this underlying paralysis. They had to engineer a way to manufacture digital trust from scratch, or the entire e-commerce experiment would collapse. Alibaba's answer to this trust deficit was Alipay, a payment system built around a mechanism called escrow. Escrow is a financial arrangement where a third party temporarily holds and regulates the payment of funds required for two parties involved in a transaction. Alipay acted as a neutral middleman. A customer's money was locked in Alibaba's secure vault while the seller shipped the item. Funds were only released after the package physically arrived. If it was fake, the buyer got their money back. By eliminating the risk of consumer fraud, the floodgates opened. People who had never trusted the internet with a single cent were suddenly buying everyday goods, sparking a nationwide surge in digital commerce. By solving the payment bottleneck, Alibaba built the foundational infrastructure of China's entire digital economy. Between 2010 and 2014, Alibaba entered a phase of relentless growth. With a captive audience locked into its ecosystem, the company launched Tmall, a digital storefront designed specifically for verified brands to sell directly to consumers. To support this surge in online traffic and transaction data, they rolled out Alibaba Cloud. Owning the underlying server infrastructure was necessary to keep their platforms running smoothly under the weight of hundreds of millions of daily users. This rapid expansion climaxed in 2014 when Alibaba went public. They executed the largest initial public offering in world history at the time, raising roughly $25 billion on the New York Stock Exchange. That massive capital injection acted as rocket fuel. Alibaba scaled from a digital marketplace into a multi-industry leviathan, expanding into massive logistics networks, streaming digital entertainment platforms, and physical offline retail. By controlling the shopping interface, the payment gateway, and the cloud servers, Alibaba created a closed-loop monopoly on its home turf. No competitor could survive in an environment where Alibaba owned every step of the transaction. With the domestic market conquered, Alibaba set its sights outward. They launched international platforms like AliExpress and acquired the Southeast Asian network Lazada, landing their first strikes in a major global expansion. Alibaba is now bypassing local skirmishes to wage a direct global war against the reigning Western champion, Amazon. They are timing their strike to exploit a vulnerability in Amazon's armor, known as enshittification. This is the cycle where a dominant platform stops providing value to its users and instead begins extracting value from them to satisfy shareholders. Western consumers are feeling the squeeze. Amazon has trapped its users in a web of bloated platform fees, utilizing deceptive website designs to push unwanted subscriptions, and charging minimum spend limits just to access delivery perks people are already paying for. By focusing on extracting every possible cent of surplus from both the merchants and the customers, Amazon has degraded its core shopping experience. The company has grown fat, slow, and increasingly alienated its most loyal base. This dissatisfaction leaves the door open for a leaner, hungrier apex predator to step in. Contrast that bloated state with Alibaba's current operation. The Chinese giant operates a ruthless, integrated, and well-funded expansion model designed to undercut competitors on price and efficiency. You can see the physical manifestation of this push in their global logistics network. They are rapidly scaling heavily automated fulfillment centers across borders, ensuring they can deliver goods globally at speeds that rival local networks. This is a clash between Western tech decay and an unstoppable Asian monopoly bred in the most cutthroat digital market on Earth. Alibaba's war machine is perfectly calibrated to exploit Amazon's exact vulnerabilities. The only question left is whether the Western giant can fix its own internal rot before the invasion overwhelms it entirely. In 2014, Alibaba raised $25 billion in its New York Stock Exchange debut. At that moment, the company was the single largest e-commerce entity on Earth, representing the scale of Chinese private wealth. However, the platform's inventory was destabilized by a high volume of counterfeit goods. Maintaining quality control over millions of disparate third-party listings proved increasingly difficult as the company expanded. Alibaba also exercised strict control over its sellers. Merchants were often required to sign exclusive agreements, effectively barring them from listing products on rival platforms under threat of losing their visibility on Alibaba's search results. These practices drew the attention of Chinese government regulators. Oversight bodies began documenting instances of market abuse and consumer complaints regarding both the quality of goods and the treatment of sellers. The combination of rapid, unchecked growth and aggressive foundational tactics created a specific vulnerability. Alibaba had become large enough to impact the entire national economy while operating outside of established regulatory norms. Jack Ma operated with a high degree of confidence during this period. As the public face of China's tech boom, he occupied a position of significant cultural and financial influence. That confidence culminated in a 2020 speech in Shanghai. Ma publicly characterized the Chinese financial regulatory system as a hindrance to innovation, comparing state banks to pawn shops. The response from the state was immediate. Only days before its scheduled launch, regulators blocked the initial public offering of Ma's financial subsidiary, Ant Group. The Ant Group IPO was projected to raise approximately $34 billion. Its sudden cancellation disrupted global financial markets and forced institutional investors to reevaluate the risk of Chinese tech assets. Ma had misread the power dynamics of the region. The state demonstrated that it possessed the administrative capacity to halt the largest financial transactions in the world with a single directive. Regulators began a comprehensive overhaul of Alibaba's core business model. The company's headquarters became the focal point of an intensive anti-monopoly investigation. The government eventually levied a $2.8 billion fine against Alibaba. The penalty was calculated based on 4% of the company's 2019 domestic sales, the largest fine of its kind in Chinese history. Beyond the fine, the state imposed direct oversight on internal operations. Alibaba was forced to modify its algorithms and dismantle its choose one of two exclusivity policies, ending its monopolistic hold over its sellers. Through these actions, the government established a clear ideological boundary. The message was that no private entity, regardless of its global reach, operates above the authority of the state. Following the speech and the subsequent crackdown, Jack Ma stopped appearing in public. For months, no public statements, social media posts, or television appearances from the billionaire. This lack of leadership created a vacuum within Alibaba's executive structure. The remaining board members faced a transition toward a corporate culture defined by caution and regulatory compliance. This tracks Alibaba's stock price. Valuation dropped sharply as investors reacted to state intervention and the founder's absence. Over following months, the downward trend continued. Institutional trust remained low as the company struggled under the new regulatory framework. While the $2.8 billion fine was a significant one-time cost, The long-term erosion of investor confidence became the primary driver behind the company's valuation collapse. Between 2021 and 2023, Alibaba's growth stagnated. The company focused on restructuring and compliance, while its core e-commerce business faced increasing domestic pressure. Agile domestic competitors moved to capture the market share Alibaba was struggling to defend. These rivals were specifically designed to operate within the state's new regulatory environment. JD.com expanded its physical logistics network, emphasizing its ability to manage its own inventory and delivery staff. This reliability allowed them to attract users who were moving away from Alibaba's third-party model. PDD Holdings, through Pinduoduo, targeted lower-tier cities with group buying discounts. By focusing on high-volume, low-cost items, they successfully undercut Alibaba's pricing on essential consumer goods. An organization focused primarily on internal restructuring and government relations cannot easily combat aggressive, market-focused competitors. By the end of 2023, Alibaba's domestic dominance had been significantly reduced. On the international stage, Alibaba's status also shifted. The company had previously served as the primary example of Chinese digital innovation for Western consumers. However, global shopping habits migrated toward a different set of retailers. These companies focused on direct-from-factory shipping and hyper-efficient logistics to capture international demand. Shein rose to lead the global fast fashion sector. By shipping directly to consumers and bypassing traditional retail nodes, they replaced Alibaba's platforms as the primary source for low-cost apparel. Temu followed a similar path, spending billions on global marketing to drive app adoption. Their model focused on extreme price competition, successfully attracting hundreds of millions of international users. Alibaba has lost its position as the international symbol of Chinese e-commerce. It now operates as one of several players in a market it once controlled. The shift in the digital landscape was final. As the market moves forward, the seat once occupied by a single dominant empire remains open, serving as a reminder of how quickly authority can be reassigned. Corporate survival. Between 2023 and 2025, Alibaba executed a great restructuring. The core strategy was corporate fission, taking a massive, highly visible target and deliberately breaking it apart. They severed the empire into 6 independent subsidiaries. By decentralizing their power, they ensured that the company as a whole could no longer be paralyzed by a single regulatory strike. These new entities pivoted away from flashy consumer apps and focused on foundational, unglamorous physical infrastructure. They anchored themselves to the heavy steel and shipping lanes of international logistics. Inside these facilities, the operation is a sprawling network of sorting lines and fulfillment centers. It is capital-intensive, physical work that rarely attracts media scrutiny. The second pillar of this survival strategy relies on digital utilities. They are expanding their cloud computing division, housing datasets in subterranean server banks. By trading consumer prominence for these boring underlying services, Alibaba successfully camouflaged its core wealth and neutralized its threat level to regulators. The current battleground for global tech supremacy is artificial intelligence. In the West, tech leaders are fighting a war for media attention. Companies like OpenAI are aggressively commanding the public narrative, treating headlines as a metric of success. Alibaba possesses the capital and the technology to compete in this space. They are currently building massive proprietary AI models of their own, yet they actively refuse to step into the light. Despite their capabilities, they are completely avoiding the public relations war that defines their Western counterparts. Their leadership learned a harsh lesson. After the 2020 crackdown, high-profile dominance in a sensitive new technology is no longer a trophy, it is a liability. By choosing the shadows, they are allowing their rivals to become the primary lightning rods for regulatory oversight, while they perfect the underlying engine in private. Alibaba continues to operate as a multi-billion-dollar machine, maintaining revenue levels that place it among the most profitable companies on Earth. But this wealth comes with a strict trade-off. They operate under rigid parameters, facing intense, state-monitored boundaries capping their overall influence. As a result, they have been replaced in the forefront of the everyday user's mind. Newer, louder rivals now occupy the digital real estate Alibaba once monopolized. They survived the most dangerous period in their history, but they only managed to do so by retreating entirely from the spotlight. Alibaba did not disappear. Its power was simply sequestered. It is still there, operating quietly, but it is no longer permitted to shine as the center of the economy. What remains behind the curtain is a massive, dormant volcano of data and infrastructure, pulsing quietly in the dark. An unseen leadership monitors this massive network from the safety of the shadows, fully aware of their suppressed capabilities. Out of sight of the media and the general public, the massive machine is still running, and it is still learning.